There comes a moment in life when you begin to realize that your silence was never a void. It was a strategy. That your invisibility was never rejection. It was divine preservation. That the seasons where you felt unseen, overlooked, and misunderstood were never a mistake. They were sacred. And if these words are resonating in a place deeper than logic, it is because this message was crafted for your spirit, not for your ears. You didn't stumble here by accident. You were guided. Because God is revealing something now that he has long kept hidden. And that hidden thing is you. You've spent years wondering why you felt different, why you never truly fit in, why crowds made you feel alone, and why certain rooms seemed to shrink your presence no matter how loudly your soul tried to speak. That tension inside of you wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. You were never designed to blend in with the ordinary. You were built for something sacred, something weighty, and before anything could be revealed through you, it had to be refined within you. So God did what only he knows how to do with those he chooses. He hid you, not out of punishment, but protection, not to bury you, but to prepare you. Like Enoch, whose walk with God was so intimate that he bypassed death itself, you too have been called into something different, something that doesn't follow the patterns of this world. And while others were racing for platforms, for applause, for visibility, God took you into silence, into places no one else could access, into spiritual chambers where your character was formed in fire and your identity shaped in solitude, not because you were forgotten, but because you were too important to be rushed. You've walked through valleys that had no witnesses, fought battles that had no cheerleaders, chosen righteousness when no one was watching. And perhaps, like Elijah, your journey hasn't made sense to those around you. You've been moved, withdrawn, shifted, not by your own will, but by a divine hand that leads without explanation. This is the mystery of the chosen. Their calling doesn't come with clarity at first, it comes with contradiction. You were misunderstood not because you were lost, but because you were being led. And now, the silence is breaking. The unveiling has begun. Everything in your life is about to make sense. The long nights, the unanswered prayers, the rooms you were excluded from, the circles that couldn't hold you, the disconnection, the discomfort, the hiddenness. It was all leading here. You are not on the outside anymore. You're on the edge of ascension. And the same God who hid you is now revealing what he planted in secret. So I need you to pause, not just physically, but spiritually. Let your heart be still. Let your mind stop racing. Because what you're about to hear isn't just information, it's a confirmation, a message from the throne room of heaven, one that will awaken what has been dormant in you for too long, one that will explain why you've never been able to settle for less, why you've always felt the pull toward something higher, something eternal. And if your spirit bears witness with this truth, if something inside you already knows this word is yours, then do something simple but powerful. Type 777 in the comments right now, not for performance, but as a sign to yourself and to heaven that you're ready. Ready to stop shrinking, ready to stop doubting, ready to step fully into the purpose that's been waiting for you all along. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, because what's coming next isn't just content, it's calling. You weren't meant to blend in, you were chosen to break through. And today, we begin uncovering exactly what that means. There is a type of silence that doesn't signal abandonment. It announces selection. When God chooses a person for something eternal, something that cannot be explained by human reasoning or measured by worldly standards, the first thing he often does is hide them, not out of rejection, but for preservation, because what he places inside the chosen cannot be exposed prematurely. It must be cultivated in obscurity, matured in solitude, refined without distraction. And perhaps, without even realizing it, this is where you've been. You've been wondering why the rooms you once filled with presence and light now feel tight, cold, or distant. You've felt the gradual fading from certain circles, the sudden ending of conversations that once sustained you, the growing discomfort with spaces that no longer seem to recognize your value. This shift didn't come from offense. It came from heaven. Because when God begins to elevate a soul, he doesn't start with a spotlight. He begins with a veil. You weren't pulled away from people to be lonely. You were set apart to be transformed. Sacred isolation isn't exile, it's encounter. Just as Enoch walked with God until he was no longer seen by men, so too have you been walking through seasons where your spiritual proximity to God has increased, while your visibility in the world has decreased. And that's not by accident, it's by design. When God calls someone higher, he first separates them from the noise, the distractions, the cycles that cannot carry them where he's taking them. But this is where the soul often feels conflicted. Because everything in your flesh longs to be understood, affirmed, included, yet everything in your spirit knows that inclusion often costs you intimacy with God. And so the separation begins, quiet, unannounced, misunderstood by those who never saw the weight you carried. But while others watched your silence and mistook it for stagnation, heaven was moving. God was clearing your space, not to leave you empty, but to make room for something holy. Think of Elijah, not taken by sickness or sword, but lifted in a whirlwind. His departure wasn't publicized. It was sacred. The same God who hides his treasures deep within the earth also hides his servants deep within time. And when the moment of unveiling comes, there is no need for announcement. The absence speaks louder than presence ever could. What felt like isolation was actually insulation, and what looked like stillness was strategic motion. So if you've been hidden, unseen, quieted, don't despair. That's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of favor. You are being separated, not for judgment, but for assignment. And when the time comes, just as it was with Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness before returning with authority to part seas, your silence will give way to purpose. The man who disappeared will return, transformed. And no one will be able to explain it, but they will see it. Because the one who was hidden by God always returns carrying what only heaven could give. There is a pain that no one sees, a weight you carry in silence, the kind of struggle that doesn't leave bruises on the body, but reshapes the soul. And for those who are chosen, this struggle is not random, it's revelatory. While others live on the surface, your life has been shaped in the deep. You've been forged in seasons of invisible warfare where your strength had to come from a place beyond human support, where the only applause you heard was the silent affirmation of heaven. You've walked through rejection, not because you were wrong, but because you were different. You've endured delay, not because you were forgotten, but because you were being positioned. You felt the ache of being unseen in rooms you served with all your heart. You showed up, you gave, you stood firm, and yet they didn't recognize the oil on your life. They saw your presence but missed your purpose. They heard your words but missed the weight behind them. And that's the cost of being chosen. Your struggle is sacred, but it is rarely acknowledged by man, and yet God saw it all. He saw the nights you didn't sleep, the prayers you couldn't finish, the tears you never spoke of. He saw when you held your tongue instead of defending yourself. He saw when you forgave quietly, when you kept showing up while bleeding on the inside. He saw when you gave more than you received, when you carried burdens that weren't yours, when you lifted others while you were breaking. And though no one clapped, heaven recorded every act as worship. This is what they missed: the cost. The crushing that came before the clarity, the depth of surrender behind your silence. They saw resilience, but didn't recognize the sacrifice. They assumed your calm was weakness, your patience was naivety, your withdrawal was failure. But all along, God was allowing them to see only what they were permitted to see, because the fullness of who you are was never for public consumption. It was being preserved for divine purpose. And now, those very struggles, the ones you tried to hide, the ones you thought disqualified you, are the signals of your calling. They are the proof that your journey wasn't ordinary, that your preparation wasn't easy, that your oil wasn't cheap, because only those who have walked through hidden fire can carry a flame that doesn't burn out. So don't despise the pain they overlooked. Don't shrink because they didn't see. Your struggle wasn't wasted, it was seen. And what they missed, God remembered. Every scar, every surrender, every silent cry. Heaven never needed their recognition to validate your anointing. And now, the same God who watched you suffer in secret is preparing to raise you in the open. There comes a sacred moment, quiet, unnoticed by most, when the very thing that once looked like isolation is revealed to be transformation. And while others are still trying to figure out where you went, heaven is already announcing who you've become. Because for the chosen ones, removal is never just an exit. It is the first breath of a divine unveiling. What looked like retreat was actually repositioning. What felt like silence was preparation for visibility on God's terms. God never hides what he doesn't plan to reveal, but he does it in his time, not ours. And now, the veil is lifting, slowly, gently, powerfully. The same people who overlooked you will begin to sense your absence, not as a void, but as a statement. Not out of vengeance, but by divine orchestration. You are not where they left. You are not who they remember. And that dissonance between their memory and your emergence is not accidental, it is intentional. You were never meant to be explained. You were meant to be revealed. Your disappearance wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough in disguise. Your distance was not about pride. It was about purpose. And as the unveiling begins, it won't require your voice to validate it. You won't need to prove yourself. Your fruit will speak. Your peace will speak. Your elevation will speak. God never lifts a veil without preparing the hearts of those who must now see differently. And while some will resist your transformation, clinging to the version of you that fit their comfort, others will finally recognize what was in you all along. The one who was removed is now the one being remembered, not because you asked to be seen, but because God ordained the moment. Think of Moses returning to Egypt. He left as a fugitive, but came back carrying fire. He was dismissed, forgotten, and exiled. But when God said it was time, no force in the world could stop what he had placed inside him from rising to the surface. So it is with you. You're not coming back to prove them wrong. You're rising to fulfill what's right. You're not re-entering rooms to demand honor. You're walking in as the evidence that God doesn't forget those he hides. The veil is lifting. And everything you learned in the silence, the wisdom, the strength, the discernment, now becomes your covering in the open. You no longer need the approval of those who couldn't recognize you. You've been approved by the one who made you invisible for a reason. This unveiling won't be loud, it won't be dramatic, but it will be undeniable. And when people ask where you've been, the answer won't come from your lips. It will radiate from your presence. The light you carry now can no longer be dimmed. You were hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be released at the appointed time. And now that time has come. Elevation is not just a moment, it is a mantle. It doesn't come only with blessings, it comes with weight When God begins to lift you, the air gets you thinner. Conversations feel different. Environments lose their comfort. Not because you've changed in arrogance, but because you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be. And with this rise comes a new kind of clarity, one that forces you to guard your spirit, not in fear, but in wisdom. Because not everything or everyone can follow you where God is taking you. There is a price to be paid for altitude. Pilots know that as the aircraft ascends, unnecessary weight must be released. The higher you go, the less you can carry. And the same is true for your calling. God begins to strip away distractions, not to leave you empty, but to make room for what is sacred. Some relationships will naturally fall away. Some conversations will lose their meaning. The desire to be understood will be replaced by the desire to be obedient. And while this may feel isolating, it is actually God preserving the atmosphere around your life. When you were in the valley, you could afford to blend in. You could participate in every discussion, explain every emotion, justify your silence. But now, the altitude demands discretion. Not because you're superior, but because your mission requires focus. You are no longer called to prove anything. You are called to protect everything. Protect your mind from noise. Protect your heart from bitterness. Protect your time from what drains and delays. Because elevation without boundaries leads to collapse. And God did not bring you this far to watch you fall under the weight of unguarded access. Some will misunderstand your silence. Others will accuse you of pride. But those who walk closely with God know there comes a time when privacy becomes protection. You don't owe everyone a response. You don't need to explain what God is unfolding. Because when God elevates a soul, He also refines the soil. He removes what cannot handle the new growth. He severs what was seasonal. And what feels like disconnection is often divine filtration. You are not pulling away. You are being pulled. Upward Abraham was called to leave what was familiar, his country, his people, his father's house, and follow a voice that gave no map, only a promise. That's what elevation feels like. It's not always glamorous. It's often quiet, lonely, misunderstood, but it is sacred, it is strategic, and if you stay faithful in this stretch, you'll begin to see why God had to change your circle before He changed your scenery. This is not the time to entertain what delays you. It's the time to guard the oil that's been pressed out of you. You didn't endure what you endured just to become careless. You didn't survive the wilderness to collapse in the blessing. Your soul has been refined. Your ear has been trained to hear the whisper. Your eyes have been opened to see beyond appearances. And now that you've tasted peace, you'll no longer trade it for proximity. Your stillness is your strength. Your restraint is your response. And your obedience is your offering. God is not just calling you to rise, He's calling you to remain. To walk in altitude without compromising purity. To live above the noise without losing compassion. To dwell in sacred places without seeking applause. And that can only happen if you protect what He has given you. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them assume. Your life is no longer available for misunderstanding. Your energy is no longer up for negotiation. You've risen too far to come back down for things that no longer carry purpose. So protect your altitude, guard your soul, steward your silence, and walk forward, not with noise, but with authority. Because when God lifts someone, He doesn't just elevate their platform, He elevates their posture. And your posture now must reflect the place He has prepared for you. There comes a moment, sacred, quiet, and irreversible, when the veil lifts, when what once concealed now reveals, when what once felt like delay begins to look like divine design. And chosen one, that is the moment you're standing in right now. All of heaven has been watching your silent obedience. Every time you chose to remain kind instead of retaliating. Every night you wept in secret and still rose in surrender. Every time you stayed when you could have left, believed when everything said give up, and forgave when bitterness would have been easier. Heaven didn't miss a moment. And now, you're stepping into visibility not because you demanded it, but because you've been made ready for it. To be hidden was never a punishment. It was preparation. It was sanctification. God was not withholding you, He was preserving you. Like a precious seed buried in soil, covered in darkness, pressed by time and pressure, but destined to break through. And now, just like that seed, you are not just rising, you are sprouting into your holy assignment. Not for applause, not for popularity, but for impact. You carry something this world desperately needs. Evidence. You are not called to impress. You are called to embody truth. You are not here to compete. You are here to carry glory. Your anointing is not decoration, it's weaponry. You've been entrusted with a mantle, not just a message. That means your walk must now reflect the weight of what you carry. You are a walking sign, a living scripture, a vessel shaped by fire, softened by surrender, and sealed by grace. It's time to walk in your assignment, not as a title, but as a testimony. This means letting go of the need to be explained. It means being misunderstood and staying silent anyway. It means walking into spaces knowing you don't need validation to be valuable. The assignment demands maturity. It demands consecration. It demands decisions that no one else may understand, but God does. And if He called you, He will also equip you. Remember Joseph. When he was finally revealed, it wasn't to boast about his dreams. It was to preserve a nation. His pain had a purpose. His silence was strategic. His unveiling was not about revenge, but redemption. And that's your calling too. To carry what others discarded. To heal what others broke. To speak when silence has buried truth for too long. You've been set apart. Not just to look different, but to be different. Your posture must now reflect heaven. Your presence must carry peace. Your decisions must echo eternity. And your lifestyle must whisper to the weary that God is real, that grace is alive, that holiness is not outdated. It's the very thing that transforms everything it touches. So do not shrink to make others comfortable. Do not dim to avoid offense. You were chosen for this. You were preserved for this. And now that the veil is lifting, walk boldly, walk humbly, walk with fire in your bones and purity in your hands. Because the world isn't just watching, it's longing for something real, something holy, something eternal, and that something, chosen one, is what your life has become. You've been hidden. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were holy. Not because you were rejected, but because you were reserved. All along, heaven knew what was growing inside of you. And now, as the veil lifts, you begin to understand. This was never about being seen by people. It was about being sealed by God. What felt like stillness was actually sacred movement. What looked like delay was deliberate design. Every silent night, every unseen act of obedience, every moment of surrender when you could have chosen the easy way out. It was all being written into the pages of your calling. You are not who you were before this silence. You have been changed, sharpened, softened, strengthened. Your roots went deep because they had to hold the weight of what's coming next. And what's coming is not noise, not fame, not superficial recognition. What's coming is impact. Heaven is trusting you now with visibility, not for vanity, but for purpose. You will not rise to impress. You will rise to heal. You will rise to reveal. You will rise to carry glory, not your own, but the one who kept you hidden when others ran ahead. Chosen one, this is the season where God calls you out of the quiet, not to expose your wounds, but to reveal your wholeness. Your testimony is not in what you escaped, but in how you remained, how you endured, how you believed even when you could not see. And now, your very presence becomes a signpost for those still in hiding. You become evidence that yes, it was worth it. Yes, he sees. Yes, he knows. And yes, the unveiling comes. So walk now, not in fear, not in doubt, but in reverent confidence. The same God who withdrew you from the noise is now sending you with a voice. But it's not just any voice. It is a sound born in silence, a wisdom born in weeping, a strength born in stillness. You don't need to explain your past. It has prepared your presence. You don't need to rehearse your pain. It has refined your posture. And you don't need to rush your moment. It has already begun. This is not your ending. It is your elevation. You are not leaving the stage. You are stepping into the sacred. And as you go, let nothing pull you back to what you've outgrown. Let no voice from the past override the call of heaven. Let no temporary applause replace eternal alignment. What you carry now is holy, and what God has sealed cannot be stopped. So take a breath, lift your head, and walk, not with force, but with the quiet power of someone who knows they've been sent. Because you have. Not by man, not by ambition, but by the one who formed you in silence and now calls you forth in fire. And now, as this message comes to a close, let this final moment become a personal altar, not just words spoken, but truth received. If your spirit knows this was for you, type Amen in the comments. Not for me, not for performance, but as your agreement with heaven, as your yes to the assignment, the unveiling, and the next chapter of your divine purpose. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, not just to stay connected, but to stay aligned. This space is not about content, it is about calling. And you, chosen one, are not watching by accident. You were never forgotten, you were being prepared. Now walk, because your unveiling has begun. May the peace of the Most High walk with you from this moment on and never leave your side.